Hi everyone. The light hasn't blinked yet, but I assume it's going to in a few seconds. My name is Emily, and I'm the young adult librarian at the Rock Island Public Library. There it goes. And today I'm going to tell you about two books that are both available through our Hoopla app. And as I've said many times probably at this point, Hoopla is probably my favorite of our apps because it has the best, I would say, variety of titles and probably the most titles. There's just a lot there. There's different formats of things too. So there's graphic novels, there's comics, now there's manga, and there's books, like ebooks and e-audiobooks. And movies and music also. So you can check out a lot of stuff, and you get 15 checkouts a month. And even with that, I don't use all of mine, even if I'm renewing something to finish it. But today, I have books you might enjoy. And this first book is The Art of Ruth E. Carter. And this book, I picked it and didn't realize that she is the Illinois Library Presents author who's going to be speaking in March. So on March 20th, if you want to hear, this is Ruth E. Carter, she's a two-time Academy Award winner for costume design. And if you want to hear her talk about this book and like the process, let's see, I'm going to read the title because I left it open in a different window. The title is Interweaving Tradition and Imagination Through Costume Design. And if you want to check that out, that is March 20th, and you just have to go to our website and sign up. This is a live stream. Illinois Libraries Present does this with different authors like every month. And if you sign up, you can just watch this event through Zoom. So it's very nice because, like, for a lot of libraries, we can't necessarily always bring speakers in. Certainly not every month. Like, we can't bring in an author each month to speak. But something like this, you get to have the experience of hearing an author talk about their book and their process, and in this case, just costume design as well. And this book, it spans, Ruth E. Carter, she started out like in theater, so you get like her days in high school and college. Like there's a lot of photos in the first section of her as a young person. This photo, she writes that this was the photo that embarrassed my uncle so badly that he told my mother to like just take her out of school. Like what's she doing? And it's like, well, it's theater, and she had a really good time. Designing costumes certainly, and this wasn't like originally her plan. Like she wanted to not drop the book. She wanted to act, but then was offered costumes, like after auditioning for a play and not getting the part that she was looking to get. But then she really fell in love with the process of creating costumes and that part of storytelling. And so she went on to have, I think she had an internship with an opera company. And it was after this that she started to, Lee was one of the first people she collaborated with. And in working on film, she started like doing these drawings of different costumes. And her brother is a visual artist. So this was something where she started this work, 1987, so School Days. That was her first feature film. And you can see Spike Lee here. And she was just, like, you can see how there's this really amazing variety of costumes on this film, and a lot of Ruth E. Carter's films. This one, so it was like, you had to have outfits for college athletics, but also this was like homecoming dance with sorority members, I believe. And so it was just sort of everything you can imagine. So like everyday clothing, but also like more formal wear and things like that. And as you get into the next section, one of the things she talks about is costumes that she created for Do the Right Thing, which is back in theaters. Just today and tomorrow, it's going to be showing at the Last Picture House. I always say Last Picture Show because that's a movie. But no, it'll be at the Last Picture House today and tomorrow. And this movie, I believe, is from 1989, and it's a Spike Lee film about this day in New York. It's a very hot summer day. And so one notable thing about the movie is that most characters, they maybe only have one or two costumes. Like at one point people get into a fire hydrant. Like there's water. People are trying to cool off. So people change clothes after that. But there's like one character who doesn't even change them because he's not there at the fire hydrant. So you get her different designs for these different characters. And it's really interesting to see just how her style, I wouldn't say evolves exactly, but she sort of breaks this down into, here are my early films, and then period pieces, in which she really explores like family history, as well as like African American history and American history. And this was like something that came up a lot, of course, in creating costumes for Malcolm X. And let's see, you get like, oh yeah, so with the Malcolm X costumes, again, they spanned like different styles because different decades. So you had, like, she writes about this too, where you had to like have these outfits from this person's childhood and then their years as a young adult, and finally sort of like the suits you know this person from, or maybe you associate with this historical figure. And like this is from the Steven Spielberg directed movie Amistad. And this was something where, okay, it was like you see sort of like, okay, on one page you'll get sketches and then you'll get actual shots from films and what the costumes look like finished. And it's really just a fantastic book. I love this because I really enjoy movies, and it's fun to see how movies get made. Like, I really enjoy reading about the process, and in a book like this, seeing it broken down visually is really cool. So, a lot of great photos, a lot of great just descriptions of working with different actors, including Chadwick Boseman, and you get, like, obviously, there's a big section about Black Panther, because, here we go, so you get, like, all these fascinating different sort of designs and plans, and I mean, it was so much designed for this movie. Like, yes, you have the Black Panther suit for Chadwick Boseman, like the superhero outfit, but they're just, you know, if you've seen this movie, there are so many different outfits, and they represent all these different cultures in this really amazing way. And so Ruthie Carter, she did a ton of research on this and wanted to really reflect the diversity of the African continent and the fact that, hey, this is something that just people should see and understand. Like this, so here we go. This is like, you get all these really cool, like, I love concept art with movies. There's a lot of different, yeah, and so both Black Panther and then Wakanda Forever, you get like just really cool breakdowns of how the movie was planned, costumes in particular, and you also get, I mean, different movies. So this is like, I think Coming to America 2 probably. I think this is the sequel because there's Jermaine Fowler, who I'm a fan of puppet history, so it's like, oh, it's Jermaine. But in this movie, like as in like Ruth Carter's movies, like the projects she's worked on, you can see like the attention to detail and how she really just, what she does is something she relishes and enjoys. And this will lead to some strange situations at times. Like during the writer's strike, I believe, of like, 2008, in that sort of time period, she was doing a lot of independent films. And there was one point where she writes about like, okay, so I was in my backyard and I was carving this giant donut out of foam. And my neighbors must have been thinking, what does this person do? What is her job? But she was creating a costume. And yeah, you can just see how this sort of process works, and it's really cool to enjoy the art of this, like the artistry, and you can see here is the author herself and some of the many, many outfits she has created. So check it out. Again, this book, great as an ebook. I'm holding the physical copy, which if you want to read that instead, it's due pretty soon. I'm like halfway done at this moment. Next, this book is called Near My Freedom, and it is the interesting life of Olaudah Equiano by himself, but this is a reimagining of that famous autobiography from the 18th century, because the authors, Monica Edinger and Leslie Young, what they did is they sort of turned this book into a kind of blackout poetry. So, I mean, you can see, you get that idea from the cover, but inside what it looks like is you can see they went through the autobiography of Olaudah Equiano, and all, like, different sections, different words, like, they made the decision, like, for what to focus on, and what to sort of highlight in different stories, in different sections, and different times in this person's life. And if you've never heard of Olaudah Equiano, he is somebody who I'm familiar with because I read this book in college. And so you get, like, here we go. This is like what the inside cover of one of the editions. I believe there were like 9 editions of this book while he was alive. And he was somebody who, I believe, like, he was kidnapped as a boy from what I believe is modern day Ethiopia. But also, he spoke various languages, like as he was taken across the African continent and eventually transported through the Middle Passage, which is a horrifying trip to the West Indies. He, though, learned different languages and could communicate with other people, and eventually learned English, was able to kind of start to communicate with people, even when he got to the point where that was something that was very traumatic as a young man, when it got to the point that he was so far from home he couldn't speak to anybody anymore. There was nobody left who spoke the languages he did. But he is somebody who is famous because at this time, in the 18th century, where he was born was called Osaka. And in being taken from this place and ending up in the, I guess, North and South America at this time, people were starting to live there, but the main population centers, including the American colonies, also there were plantations. There were a lot of plantations, and these were controlled by the English and the Spanish. Different parts of Central America in particular had sort of been colonized. No sort of about it, but they had been specifically colonized because a lot of valuable crops grew in these parts of the world. So sugar cane, you could make rum, castor was something for castor oil. And the thing that happened, this is about 50 pages in, you hear about how Olaudah Equiano was around 12 in 1757, and that was when he first got to England. And in England, he'd never seen snow before. He was somebody who had already been working at this time because he was forced to as a slave, but as an enslaved person, he was given the name Gustavus Vasa. And this was given to it, this name was sort of forced on him by a man named Captain Pascal. He'd had another name previously, but this was a thing, certainly, unfortunately, at this time, when you would be forced to give up your name, and somebody who treated you as property would give you a different name. But the story of his life, it's so famous because he went on to learn how to read and write. This was something he sought out as he got older. In part because he had a friend, Richard was his name, and he liked to read. They were both young men around the same time. And the two of them, they had a lot of journeys together at sea. And being a sailor was something, this was a big part of Olaudah Equiano's life. Traveling the world and seeing lots of different things. He traveled with a man named Dr. Irving. They made this voyage towards the North Pole at a time when people were still looking for a northern passage to India. And this was in the late 18th century, and they recognized that, okay, no, this doesn't exist. There's not a way to get to India going up north towards the pole. But what Olaudah Equiano, in traveling and having all these experiences, he eventually was able to learn some skilled trades. And being able to read and write, and speaking fluent English by this time, he was able to start to become a merchant. And he describes it where he really started small. He was able to get a little money, which you didn't always have as a slave. But I think one of the people who owned him, treated him as property, was maybe not a Quaker, because Quakers were at this time, and I think for all of their history, basically, very anti-slavery. But this was somebody who was okay, I'm going to pay you this much. He did get some money for doing work. And this was in part because he did various jobs. Olaudah Equiano became, let's see, he wasn't exactly a bookkeeper, but there are jobs, at this time, we would call them something different today. But basically, he was skilled at math, and so it's okay, you're one of the people who's going to be keeping accounts, and he would make sure that shipments were delivered on boats, sloops. Sloops are a kind of craft he talks about a lot, because it's a smallish boat. It's got sails, but the whole idea is it's fast. This is a good ship for moving quickly, and the author, in doing all this and having all these experiences, eventually wrote his own autobiography. And he like, part of the reason he went by Gustavus Vasa, still, like, even later in life, after he'd purchased his freedom. Oh, I should say, him being a merchant, like, literally it started with, okay, I'm on one island in the Caribbean, I'm going to buy a glass vessel. And then I can go to another island and sell it for a little bit more than what I paid for it. And then I'll buy like two more things. And then I'll go to another island and sell those things. And that was how he made money. So eventually he was able to buy his freedom. And this had to do, I mean, it wasn't just that, oh, like in this book he talks about having masters who were kind. And of course the authors sort of have these parts where they kind of engage with different things in the book. Because of course, like these ideas, like the author was writing in the late 18th century. And so people did mistreat him at times, and even after he was free, even after he'd paid for his freedom, like there were still incidences where he was almost recaptured and enslaved again. But he talks about the fact that, well, okay, some people, like in being allowed to have my own money. Now, eventually this captain, who he thinks of as a friend early on, refuses to pay him these wages, even after, I believe it's the 7 Years' War, and the author survives, like, battles at sea, and eventually, like, when he's saying, oh, you know, I'd like to leave, I'd like to go and study something else, maybe not be at sea for a while, but being a sailor was a big part of the author's life. And he recognized, as time passed, like, he got interested in Christianity because this was something he was taught by people who knew him, and it was certainly like a part of learning to read at times, because he, in learning more about Christianity, Olaudah Equiano recognized, okay, in sailing, I'm contributing to the slave trade. Like, at one point, he and Dr. Irving, they go to what was called then the Mosquito Coast, and I think, oh, I'm going to forget the name of the author, but Tom Thoreau, I think, or Paul Thoreau. There's a book called The Mosquito Coast. Anyway, it takes place in that part of the world. And basically this Englishman set up this plantation. And Olaudah Equiano, he was hired to be the overseer, which traditionally is thought of as like, oh, this is a terrible, cruel person a lot of times in any narrative about slavery. But in this case, I mean, the author, I think he sort of saw himself as, well, I can make sure these people aren't mistreated. But then, of course, he was still part of the slave trade. And so it gets into, as the book goes on, how he became a famous abolitionist. And so I'll just read you, like, from the very end. Olaudah Equiano timed the release of his book in 1789 to coincide with an important debate over slavery in Parliament. His eloquent voice as a survivor of slavery was unique at the time. It represented the lived experiences and aspirations of black people, as well as their committed efforts to free themselves. Ultimately, the work of Olaudah Equiano and other abolitionists resulted in legislation that ended the slave trade. The emancipation of all enslaved people in British colonies around the world came several decades later. Now, of course, I mean, Great Britain was still ahead of the Americas by about 3 decades. I mean, you know, before our Civil War. But throughout this book, you get sort of like different commentary, like on Christianity and slavery and how people thought of this. They could sort of deal with this cognitive dissonance in the 18th century, because some people said, oh, well, like, you shouldn't be enslaving Christians. Like, this was an argument that the author made himself. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't a Christian thing to be doing. But then, of course, there were other people who argued differently. And certainly, like, the Catholic Church and the Church of England, they didn't use their power to help end slavery. In fact, their missionary organization, this is the Church of England, owned a large plantation on Barbados where several hundred people were enslaved. And, I mean, some people justified this by, well, if these people hadn't been enslaved, they never would have encountered Christianity. But the author in this narrative gets into the fact that, hey, this is a horrifying practice. It separates families. This is terrible. This is monstrous. As human beings, we shouldn't be doing this. And he was an important voice, again, in the suffrage movement of the 18th century. He died, I believe, 10 years before slavery was officially done away with in Great Britain. But this is just a really interesting story, and a really, like, just, if you're somebody who's not heard of this person or this story before, it's a really fascinating way to get into this history. And, I mean, the fact that, like, when Olaudah Equiano was alive. Like, he was able to support his family and from like a writing and speaking career, and he was probably like the first best-selling author of African descent in Europe. So if you're interested in history, check this out. This was a book, it was nominated for like a nonfiction award from YALSA this year, and that's why I checked it out, because I thought, oh, I'd read the like autobiography, one of the editions, you know, from like, this was a college class years ago, so I thought, oh, I'll check this out and see how it tells this story in kind of a different way. So yeah, if you like novels in verse, this is nonfiction in verse, which is just, yeah, kind of a very interesting twist. And again, both of these books are available through Hoopla, so if you want to check them out, you sure can, and you don't have to wait for somebody else to check them in. But if we've reached our daily borrowing limit, then you will probably have to wait until either after midnight, or you can just do it like any time before noon, I would say. Usually by late afternoon, it can get kind of iffy if, you know, you're trying to use a checkout that day. And thank you for watching. I will see you again next week. And let's see, I'm going to mention we have Shark Dissection coming up tonight at Southwest. And then again next week here at the Downtown Library, although both of these are filled up. But if we have any cancellations, I will update the calendar if you're interested. So thanks for watching.